Welcome to the Ellen Show. I'm Ellen DeGeneres, and with us today is Kurt Vonnegut. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Ellen.
So this book is different from your other books because normally you write about science fiction.
I mean, yeah, I've been called a science fiction writer, though I really just think that I have an interest in science, being a chemistry major, and I have a knowledge of it, and so I often write about it. So I have been labeled a science fiction writer, but overall I wouldn't say this is too much of a departure for me, because it's still writing, which is what I love.
Well, so then it wasn't very difficult for you to write about yourself and your experiences and your opinions.
No, actually, in many ways this was really easier because I could write about my opinions. You know, wasn't limited to one thing and trying to figure out how to get a story out. I could just write what I thought I wanted to write. There's no narrative arc to this. It's just my thoughts.
Slaughterhouse-Five involved your experiences, but it was written about a fictional character. So how did that compare to this book?
Well, yeah, as I touched on before, that was harder because I had to write about one, specific occurrence, and it took me 28 years before I was able to write about what I saw in Dresden. It was really terrible. I saw the destruction of Dresden. I saw the city before and then came out of an air raid shelter and saw it afterward, and certainly one response was laughter. While we were being bombed in Dresden, sitting in a cellar with our arms over our heads in case the ceiling fell, one soldier said it as though he were a duchess in a mansion on a cold and rainy night. I wonder what the poor people are doing tonight. Nobody laughed, but we're all so glad he said it. At least we were still alive. He proved it. But with this, I had the freedom to just write what I wanted, and it was really lightning. I was able to write in a much more conversational manner. I think the writing style in this book is very different than that of Slaughterhouse-Five.
So in this book, you have some very unusual graphs. Can you tell us about them?
I can, and in fact, I actually brought a visual aid to assist in my explanation here. So this is my graph of it's the narrative arc. I like to call it the BE graph because, it goes from beginning to end. And so this is called the man in a hole graph, and it shows a man who initially starts out with good fortune, somewhat prosperous, but then as the story moves along, he starts to experience some ill fortune or something very bad happens to him, and he ends up down here in the middle of the story. And then the rest of the story is him trying to climb his way out of this bad situation. And what's very important is that at the end, he emerges slightly higher than he was at the beginning of the story. And that's really what makes this graph.
And why are these graphs important to your writing? Why did you decide to include them?
Well, it shows you how really many stories are very formulaic. And it's rare that you'll get a story that you can't graph with this. Or that has a very unusual graph. I think one example, some of the works of Kafka they just start out and they just go down infinitely, and I mean those are truly unique stories.
So humor is very present in your book. Can you tell us a bit about how you first discovered humor, how you got this sense of humor?
Yeah, well, when I was a child growing up, I had my two parents and two siblings who were 9 and 5 years older than me, respectively. And so often at the dinner table, they would be talking, and what they were talking about would go completely over my head, and they weren't very interested in hearing about my childish daily activities. And so I just felt left out of the conversations until one day, I made a pun or something, some sort of joke, and suddenly everything stopped, and I had their attention. And from then on, I realized that if I could be funny, I would get my family's attention, and I'd be able to relate to them at meals.
We really could use some more food. This depression's been tough.
Yeah, this water just isn't cutting it anymore. Need some actual food.
Yeah, we need a new president too. Hoover sucks.
Yeah, he does. Kind of don't want to break this to you guys, but I'm gonna have to spend the money that we were gonna use to buy food. On my lower back, it's been just in constant pain lately.
What are you gonna do?
Well, acupuncture treatments, hopefully in Chicago or something. We'll see. I don't know.
Don't trust people who do acupuncture. They're backstabbers.
You are very ironic in your book. Like when you said that war only made billionaires out of millionaires. Today's war is making trillionaires out of billionaires. Now I call that progress. Can you explain why you speak this way in your book?
Well, my books have been critiqued and said, they said I had gallows humor. I think there's some truth to that. It's a very pessimistic humor, and it's really been like a coping mechanism. Ever since I was a child, I've used a lot of irony because it's an easier way to make light of something dark that's happening.
So, you call yourself a Luddite. Can you please describe to us what that is?
Well, I come from Ned Ludd, who, in the start of the industrial era in Britain, he was a worker, and he was afraid that newer looms would get rid of his job because he was no longer needed with his technological advancement, and so he just smashed all the looms. It's in a struggle of man against machine, and so a Luddite is someone who resists technological improvement and yearns for the older things. And in myself, it manifests itself in various ways. I don't really email that much. I generally send my letters, often in manila envelopes. And instead of typing this on a computer, I use my typewriter. And once I've typed 20 pages, I edit it with a pencil, mark it up, and then I send it to my typist in my manila envelopes. And then, she's a typist, which is somewhat obsolete now, and she then types it up on a typewriter. And so you can say we're both Luddites, really.
Well, Kurt, you sound very angry at the world and distraught. Where does this all thing come from?
Well, as a child, I was growing up in the Great Depression, and everyone was talking about prosperity, and they say, there will be prosperity tomorrow. Let's make plans for the prosperity to come. And throughout my childhood, there wasn't really much prosperity. And finally, it was, the Great Depression. And finally, when I grew up, when I was a young adult, let's say, I went and I fought in a war. And that didn't really seem like prosperity to me either. And so, I think that these beliefs really come from my childhood. And some of my bitterness about the lack of the prosperity that everyone's always talking about.
And class, E equals MC squared. Okay, class dismissed. Wait, Kurt, stay here. Kurt, I know your family's been going through a tough time. Hell, everybody is, but prosperity will come, Kurt. Things will get better, I promise.
So, can you tell us how you came up with the name A Man Without a Country?
Well, yeah. So originally, I was actually going to name this book The 51st State, which is denial. But then I just felt that in light of everything that was happening, everything the fellow Americans were doing, and really after George Bush became president, I just felt like this was not my country, and I am really a man without a country because I cannot condone what the United States is doing and the path that it's going down.
So what exactly do you have against President Bush?
Well, the man is an idiot and unfit to govern. He is the second stupidest man in his administration, following Donald Rumsfeld, who thought that invading a country would just work fine. You can bring in a bunch of soldiers who don't know, who can't speak the language, and everything will work out smoothly. There's no communication is always good. His own parents think that he's unfit to govern. They didn't expect him to become governor of Texas. They thought he would lose. They didn't think he'd win presidency. He can't say the word nuclear. He says nuclear, which is just not a word. This man is just uneducated. He has chosen his vice presidential candidate, and really most of his members of the cabinet as just his cronies or very poorly qualified to hold such positions. Their only qualification really being they're his buddies and they're wealthy. So I really see that there are no qualifications that he possesses to lead this country, and I don't think he has done anything to suggest that he will, at any point, adequately lead this country.
Now time for a commercial.
I'm George W. Bush, and I approve this message. In fact, I think it is awesome. Hey there. How you doing, America? I hope you're enjoying the freedoms and liberties that we as Americans enjoy. As you well know, ever since I took office, well, things have been really, really bad. Cut! That seemed like a good one. No, you said bad. It's pretty good. Oh, I'm just finding my groove. I'm getting my groove on. There's people out there that would like you to believe the economy isn't doing so well. Well, to that I answer, hey, for the 2 million jobs we've lost, that means there's 2 million unemployed people sitting at home watching repeats of quality television, such as The Jeffersons or Facts of Life. And that just equals more ad revenue to radio and TV stations. Cut.
And we're back from commercials. So, Kurt, can you tell us about some of your other passions besides writing?
Well, I would say some of my other passions include people, like really people watching and just being around people. And there's this one woman in particular who I see very frequently, and I'm sure she has no idea who I am. But every time I see her, I'm just smitten with her. And when I see her, I see her for a couple minutes at a time, have the most mundane of interactions. I go in there and we are lined up again. I'm secretly in love with the woman behind the counter. She doesn't know it. My wife knows it. I'm not about to do anything about it. She is so nice. All I have ever seen of her is from the waist up, because she is always behind the counter. But every day she will do something with herself above her waist to cheer us up. Sometimes her hair will be all frizzy. Sometimes she'll have it ironed flat. One day she was wearing black lipstick. This is all so exciting and generous of her. Just cheer us all up, people from all over the world. So I wait in line. I say, "Hey, what was that language you're talking? Was it Urdu?" I have nice chats. Sometimes not. There's also, "If you don't like it here, why don't you go back to your little tin horn dictatorship where you come from?" One time, I had my pocket picked in there and got to meet a cop and tell him about it. Anyway, finally I get up to the head of the line. I don't reveal to her that I love her. I keep poker faced. She might as well be looking at a cantaloupe. There's so little information in my face, but my heart is beating.
So can you tell us a bit about the way you wrote this book?
Well, since it's somewhat autobiographical, it's about my life and my views and things, it's written in first person, and rather than the first person representing a character, it's just representing me and my thoughts. So I think this gives it a very conversational tone, rather than a more formal tone that some of my other books might have.
And how exactly is this book organized?
Well, the organization here, it's somewhat chronological, but there are some things that are a little out of place because they're more my thoughts than concrete things that actually happened. But I try to start myself as a child and gradually work my way as I get older.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, Kurt.
Thank you for having me.